If you're working on phase 2 or phase 3 clinical trials in Europe, there's a shift happening that's easy to miss, but it's going to affect every clinical development plan. So regulators are starting to expect real evidence of patient experience and patient preferences. So in this video, I want to walk through what's changing, what EMA and ICH are actually saying, and what that means for how you design and de-risk your clinical trials. So for a long time, the pattern was pretty familiar. You design the protocol internally, maybe pressure test it with a couple of investigators and advisory boards, and only then really think about patient engagement as part of recruitment. So the patient voice showed up as a few qualitative comments, some pro measures, maybe an advisory board somewhere in the background. And it was all really helpful, but it sat on the edges. And that's not where regulators are heading anymore. The question is shifting from, did you talk to patients, to, can you show us how patient evidence shaped what you did? So in 2024, the EMA put out a reflection paper on patient experience data. In simple terms, it says patient experience data shouldn't be an occasional add-on. It should be systematically considered across the whole development lifecycle. And it should help inform decisions like endpoints, benefit risk, and how you actually run the study. So instead of we did a focus group, the expectation is more like, here's how we generated patient experience data, here's what we learned, and here's what we changed in our plan as a result. So if your phase 2 or 3 programs can't tell that story, especially around things like burden, visit schedule, procedures, that's going to stand out more and more. So at the same time, ICH has brought out the draft E22 guideline on patient preference studies. Now this is important because it takes patient preference from being a fuzzy qualitative idea and treats them as a proper structured type of evidence. The message is, when patient preferences could influence benefit risk, you should seriously consider a formal preference study. You plan and document it like any other study, and you're clear about how those results feed into your endpoints, your label, your decisions. Put together, EMA's work on patient experience data and ICH E22 are pointing in the same direction. Patient voice isn't just decoration anymore, it is part of that data. So what does that mean for clinical development teams in practice? Because it changes the core question. It's no longer, did we involve patients somewhere? It becomes, where did patient experience evidence actually change our protocol? What do we know about how real patients will experience our inclusion criteria, our visit schedule, our digital tools, our procedures? And what trade-offs are we asking patients to make, and how do we know they're acceptable? Regulators aren't asking you to hand over every interview. They want a clear chain that connects how you gathered patient experience and preference data, what it told you, and what you then did differently in development. If you can't show that, it's harder to argue that your trial is genuinely patient-centered or that the burden is justified. And there is another gap that often gets ignored. Most patient input still comes from people who are fairly easy to reach. Patient groups, online communities, people who already know their way around the system. But the people who struggle most to access clinical trials, those in more rural or deprived areas, minoritized ethnic groups, people with insecure work or housing, they rarely appear in a structured way in development plans. Yet they're the people regulators and payers are increasingly worried about. So, questions like, can these patients realistically take part in this protocol? Will they experience benefits and risks in the same way as your current trial population? Does your evidence reflect the people who will actually be using the medicine day to day? And if the honest answer is we don't really know, that's becoming a scientific risk, a regulatory risk, and not just a health equity issue. And this is the problem we focus on at Unwritten Health. We specialize in collecting longitudinal, real-world narratives from underserved communities, the people who are often missing from clinical trials but carry a lot of that disease burden. And we do that through trusted community partners and structured methods that help sponsors see where a proposed protocol clashes with real life, how social and practical realities shape willingness and ability to take part, and how different groups experience the same journey in a very different way. We don't replace your traditional evidence, we help you de-risk it by showing you with evidence how underserved patients are likely to experience your protocol and product in the real world before you lock your design. So, just to wrap up, regulators are moving from tell us you spoke to patients to show us how patient experience and preference evidence influence your decisions. For clinical development teams, that's both a headache and a chance to lead. Because if you can build solid patient experience evidence into your phase 2 and 3 plans, including the voices of people who are normally underrepresented, you're going to be in a stronger position on both approval and access. So if you find patient experience data an interesting topic, please do follow me on LinkedIn and YouTube, where I'll be sharing more of these.